Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories of Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt ZAUN. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. In January, I spoke in Meridian, Idaho, and I met the guest for this episode. I was so intrigued by her business that I had to have her on the Stories of Traction podcast to hear her story. Today, I'm joined by Tressa McLaughlin, who is the co-owner, president, and CEO of SOLV. Welcome to the show, Tressa.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks for your time. I know you are extremely busy based on everything I know about what you do. So thank you for the time you're giving us today. I very much appreciate it. So I want to dive right into a little bit about your business, and then we'll backtrack and talk more about your story. But what are the core functions of SOLV?
SOLV is a sales organization, and we work with businesses to provide print, promo, apparel, and year-end tax forms processing.
Okay. And what was the idea when it started versus what it is today?
The idea when it first started was many years ago, and it was an opportunity for the then owner to start a business that helped other businesses with their printing needs.
Okay. And it's definitely developed into something a little bit different today, right? Because I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of your team members, and it's amazing the different departments and the different hats that a lot of people wear. So is there something specific that you're excited about? Let's just look at this year. Is there something specific you're excited about regarding maybe a new project or new launch regarding what you're doing?
I would say there's two things that I can really think of right now. Is one, we adopted a CRM tool, and it's actually a suite of apps, and we're using the CRM portion to help our sales team manage their day and work with customers better, and then also get the workflow going to our fantastic support staff. Really excited about that. And then we have a couple of really great marketing events that we do each year, and I'm seeing how those are shaping up. And those are for our customers in the Valley, and they look really amazing.
Great. All right, so let's go back to a little bit more of the beginning. Was there something that sparked an entrepreneurial spirit in you, more a grit in you? Is there a specific hero that you can point to and say, so-and-so was the one that primed you to have the grit that you have? Or was there like an aha moment that you could take us back to?
I think it has a lot to do with my DNA, and that specifically is from my parents. My parents are very hardworking individuals. They come from farms, ranches, and they graduated high school. They moved to the city, got some education, and they both went into business, owned their own businesses. And I think growing up with those two really shaped my independence as well as my responsibility and drive to make things better.
So after you saw them and you experienced it, not only consciously, but also subconsciously, all these messages of working hard and grit, did you say to yourself, I'm going to go into business? Was that the main focus?
I did. When I was younger, probably about high school age, that was one of my dreams, was to own my own business.
Okay.
Wasn't sure it was going to be possible, but opportunity presented itself. And I was like, yes, I'm going to do this.
All right. So a lot of people. So I want people to think of Hollywood messages, right? So when we think about grit in business, a lot of times we glamorize it, and a lot of different characters in different movies are glamorized regarding business. And because movies are relatively short, if a couple hours, we don't see the whole story. And then a lot of people get into leadership roles, and they recognize very quickly that it's not as glitz and glamorous as many people envision. So take us back. So you you got a lot of drive from your parents. You want to go into business, so you get into business. And what were some things that you learned early on regarding what it takes to make it in business?
I put myself through high school and college working in a grocery store. So I worked with the public. I was low man on the totem pole. So I always had the really late evening shifts and split between a couple of different jobs. And what I learned from there was customer service. And you work with the public and in a grocery store, whether you're bagging groceries, you're the checker, working in produce, all those different things, you're still serving that customer. And customers have different needs, they have different ideas, what's great. And I learned really early on that as a young kid, I didn't know everything. And perceptions aren't always what they seem. I had one particular customer that taught me a really great lesson that I'll never forget. And she was an older lady. I was probably about 16 at the time. And she would come through the grocery line, buy like 3 items, and she would want them bagged separately. And I, as a young kid, always thought it was a waste of bags. And there was one day I was carrying out her groceries, put them in the back seat for her. And she said, I so appreciate you carrying these out for me. I have arthritis and it's crippling, and I don't have anybody at home to carry in my groceries. So when you divide these up for me, it really helps me carry in these small things. And I remember that lady. I can tell you what she looks like. And I will never forget thinking, one, you don't know everybody's story. Two, the little things do matter. And whenever she would come in, I would specifically go to her checkout line. I was always bag her groceries. I would always bag them so that they were super light, double bag them, and I would always take them to her car and put them on the seat so she didn't have to reach up out of the back of the car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a plot twist, huh? From wasting bags to wow. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So I want to touch on this grocery store piece, okay? Because so when I was in high school, I worked in a convenience store. So, selling all kinds of
Mhm.
stuff, a very, very high traffic convenience store. And from that moment, I remember saying, when I have kids, they're going to work in some type of retail capacity. And in addition, they're going to be a part of one campaign, one
Mhm.
political campaign. So I've already had them a part of a political campaign. We've already knocked doors. I probably knocked
Wow.
hundreds of doors with my kids already, but I want them to be in retail because I also not only want them to learn customer service, like you said, but I want them to learn the darker side of humanity. I think often in retail jobs, people are just dumped on. And
Mhm.
I learned through working at a convenience store. I was the cashier, so just constant. This convenience store. So it's a convenience store it's pretty dominant in the area that I'm in. It's called Wawa, multi-billion-dollar corporation. They're in the process of expanding all over the U.S. They've expanded into Florida as well, but they're going to be hitting the southern states very soon. High traffic, so literally there's a line at any moment, so it's just person after person. And I quickly learned people that have charisma versus people that don't, right? There are people in line that just you were excited to see them because these are your coffee drinkers, you're religious every morning, they're buying their cup of coffee and their donuts. You get to learn about people. But I learned a little bit more about processes as well, right? Some
Mhm.
processes. It's interesting. I was recently in Motown in Detroit, and it was very interesting the way they developed Motown. It was actually developed as if it was an assembly line, right? So they took processes from assembly lines and they said, how do we create superstars? So basically, what they did, actually, the gentleman who started it was a Ford factory worker, went into the music world and said, how do we get individuals that have really good singing ability? And then on the other side of our assembly line, they're going to be superstars. And that's what Motown did really, really well. So there's a ton that we can learn from retail regarding processes and customer service and the darker side of humanity, right? Getting coffee chucked at you because people are angry, right? That's not
Right.
a joke. So, what else did you learn outside of customer service? Did you maybe see something else that you wanted to duplicate when you became a businesswoman?
I did. There was a couple things. One, you said process. So I do love a good process as long as it's effective and that processes serves the entire company to help our customers. As a salesperson or a leader of the company, I like to be in front of people. I like to be in front of my customers, learning more about them. And if I've got a good process for sending in orders so that the support team can take that and complete it and get to the customer, it gives me great peace of mind. So I really learned in all of that to listen. And if I would hear a complaint over and over about something that told me the process wasn't working or it wasn't clear or it wasn't effective. So in the grocery store line, you're obviously trying to get people through in an efficient manner, but still be friendly. So I learned a lot, listen for what wasn't working, and then also listen to what was working and to try to do more of that. I think sometimes we get really focused on the negative side. It's not working. It's not working. Well, sometimes we need to focus on, okay, this is working well. How can we do more of that?
So when we met back in January, I remember a conversation you and I both had. We were talking about sales, and I was shocked as to how much you're involved in the day-to-day regarding your sales process, especially for someone like yourself in the position that you're in. So there is someone listening to this episode that loves to delegate. They love delegating every aspect of their business. And if they knew how involved you were in the sales process, they might even be shocked. But what words of advice would you give to that person regarding understanding and unpacking things that maybe some of your sales reps aren't seeing because you are a part of that process?
I like to call it getting your fingers dirty. I understand things better when I can actually see them and talk to people. So with the sales team, I've really enjoyed working with them. A lot of them are fairly new to the company, some are pretty seasoned. And when you're talking to them, like, what's your day to day like? Could we go out on some sales calls? Tell me about this customer, what you're working on. You really start to learn what their daily life is like and where you can make it more effective so that they could be in front of customers. And then it also helps too when you're sending the orders in because you understand what they need to do to get the order to our support staff. What does the support staff need? I could improve on delegation for sure, but I just like being with the sales team. I just enjoy being with them and being in front of the customers. So to me, it's not really work. It's more about how can I help them? Because they have a goal to meet. Each of them have a goal. I want them to be successful. I want them to feel good. So how do I know how to help unless I'm working with them?
Sure. It's amazing. A lot of leaders that don't have that mindset, right? And I appreciate you mentioning that because it's really important being with your people, understanding, unpacking a lot of these different processes and trying to figure out how to make it work. One of the stories I love talking about is the story of Barefoot Wine. Absolute genius. So the owners of Barefoot Wine, they would talk to every one of their employees, and they would go into the warehouses and figure out what was working and what wasn't working. And one of the things that they discovered when they were going into some of these warehouses of individuals that were not their employees, so their employees would basically give shipments, different pallets of this wine. It's in the warehouse. And what they recognized listening to the warehouse employees was every crate looks exactly the same. So when you are busting up crates, so if you have, a time crunch, you need to get a certain amount of orders out, there was a lot of damaged goods. So one of the things that the owners of Barefoot Wine did was they established really good, tight-knit relationships with warehouse workers across the country, and they painted their crates different colors so they knew that that was Barefoot Wine's inventory. So they were a lot less likely to throw it around or potentially break it because they had those relationships with them. So it's just one of those stories where you sit back and you're like, wait a second, all the other people that could have done that but didn't, and they had substantial amount of damaged goods and it was hurting their bottom line, but Barefoot Wine was willing to do that. So you as a leader that's willing to go on these sales calls and learn, willing to learn, you're unpacking different things than someone not willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to shift gears and I want to talk. Actually, this is more of a selfish question, I guess, if you
Okay.
will, because we're talking about you younger as well as in grocery store and all the different things that you learned.
So I have 3 children. My oldest is 9. I was about ready to turn 10. We're about ready to celebrate his 10th birthday, double digits. And he is talking all the time about business. He has all these business ideas. He is obsessed with going on YouTube and just watching business videos, marketing videos. He loves business. Okay. And he has some pretty cool ideas. What advice would you give to my 9-year-old son, Elliot, regarding business right out of the gate? So clearly he's, very young. What do you think he could be doing now to prepare himself for the business world?
That is a really great question. I would think about number one, are there businesses that his parents have friends in that he could go visit and learn and just take a tour, understand how things flow? Who could he shadow? I think it's really helpful. Community service, you mentioned running the campaigns, learning to talk to people. So when you're out meeting people, shake their hands, look them in their eye, repeat their name, make them feel warm. If he can develop that skill, that works really well. And the skill of listening and listening with positive intent. He can develop that. That will take him far.
You just gave a lot of great suggestions, but one that really sticks out to me that I think a lot of people miss. Is there a business that his parents' friends own that he can shadow, he could see? Here's what's so amazing about that is I've heard from a lot of business leaders that when they have a family business and their children are coming into the business, they're having difficulty getting them in the business with other world experiences, right? So I've heard a lot of times that sometimes they'll have to go get a job elsewhere, build, climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, and then they can get rolled up into the family business. This is a great way to start early for people. So if their children have those business chops, it would be really good. What kind of businesses can they shadow? What kind of exposure can they get to different ideas and businesses? I can think of a couple right at the top of my head while you're speaking right now that I'm going to actually implement what you're saying. I think that's really, really good advice. So thank
Nice.
you for sharing that. I appreciate that. What is something that really drives you on a day-to-day basis from a positive perspective? We've talked about the, darker sides of humanity when it comes to retail. Obviously, there's not as much glitz and glamour when you are a leader. You mentioned about getting, your fingers dirty and getting down, so to speak, in the mud, trying to figure things out. What is something that really keeps you going at the pace you are going when it comes to your business?
Two things come to mind. First one, the employees. So we have employees who have decided to work for our company. So as leaders, we are responsible for them and to them, responsible to give them a good experience, responsible to help them be successful, responsible to make sure they're putting food on the table. So I always feel responsible for that. Are we doing a great job? Are we doing as much as we can? I always think about that. And then the second piece would be our customers. We have some really long-term customers that all of us know, and we know them on a personal level, but we really want to know what their goals are and how they are successful. So how can we help them as a team? We have a pretty tight-knit team. They're a funny bunch. They love to tease each other. They love competition. So I'm always thinking about them and getting them in front of our customers. They take care of them well.
So I love that right out of the gate, you mentioned your employees, your team members. That's awesome. I'm in the process of reading a book called The Great Game of Business. Cannot believe that I did not read this book sooner. It's one of the best business books I've ever read. Unbelievable. So many ideas regarding leader of leaders, right? Positioning people in your organization and all the ideas they bring in. It's phenomenal what it can do. Highly recommend that to everyone listening. The Great Game of Business. Also, the clients that have been with you for quite some time, I have a question for you on that. Is you mentioned you don't know everyone's story. You mentioned the grocery bag story. Is there some things that you've done over the years to make sure that you know your client's story so you can deliver the most value to them?
I do. I don't always contact our customers when it's time for them to order something. A lot of times I'll connect out with them when I know maybe they're a remote worker and just a connection to see how their day is going, check on the weather, find out a vacation that they're taking. Sometimes they'll tell you about their kids' graduation, life events. So I try to reach out as much as possible. It's hard to do when you have a big client base, but it doesn't take too much time to just call a couple people a week, send out a few emails, connect with them, and make it about the human side. Because at the end of the day, we all want to work with people that we know, trust, and respect. And I think developing those relationships means you go beyond the sell.
For sure. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And thank you for this conversation. I appreciate it. There's so many points of wisdom in this. I really appreciate your time. There's 3 things that are going to stick out to me most regarding our conversation. The grocery bag story, you mentioning you don't know everyone's story. I think that's something a lot of people have heard, but they don't necessarily live it. And you gave us a picture of what it means to live it. I think it's really important that we keep that front and center. We do not know everyone's story. The second piece, which is something I'm going to implement right out of the gate, I appreciate it. You mentioned, do I have any friends that own businesses that my son can shadow, can be exposed to, can experience? That's amazing. Highly recommend everyone listening, if you have children that they're interested in business, who are some of your friends that own businesses that your kids could shadow for a day? Awesome advice. And then the third and final piece, connect with them outside of a sales focus regarding your clients. Awesome. You mentioned earlier the CRM tool. I'm sure that's a great way for you to do that. So I appreciate those 3 points. If anyone wants to get more information on you, what you do, your organization, where's the best place they could go to get that?
I would go to my LinkedIn page, and then from there you can click on that and get to our website. And that will really talk about the team and what we do.
For sure. Perfect. I will include that in the show notes. People can just click and go from there. Thank you for your time today. I very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being asked, and it's been really awesome time with you.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.